Rash, and welcome to Be Young, Be Strong. It's such a pleasure to see you. It is 10 p.m. in Belgium, 4 p.m. in the US. Now, if we go back not only at time, but really in your past, who were you at the age of 18, 20, and what were you dreaming of?
Oh, when I was 18 or 20, I was dreaming of the Olympics. And one of my heroes, I ran the 800 meters. And my hero at that time was Ivo Van Dam. Now that is me, that is I running. But Ivo Van Dam from Belgium was at that time one of the great runners in the 800 meters and the 1500 meters. He won silver medals at the Olympics, and at the next Olympics, it looked like he would win gold medals, but unfortunately he was killed in a car wreck. A very tragic loss for track and field. But he was a hero, so I had an early connection to Belgium.
You started to study literature, which is your great passion in life, and you became a teacher. What did you like about transmitting to the new generation?
Well, I believe literature is important, and I still do, even in these times when it's very easy to be cynical about so many things. But I think there is something for me that literature does that nothing else can. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think what it is and what I hope to transmit to my students as a teacher and as a teacher of literature and a teacher of writing is that for me, reading a book is an act of communion between a writer and a reader, because I'm giving the reader, as a writer myself, splotches of ink on a page. For that book to become alive, for the reader to have an intense experience, the reader has to bring herself or himself into it. So it's an act where we come together and create something.
Now, it is a thing to study literature and the voice of others, but how did you find your own voice? And why did you want to give, through your own literature, a voice to the one who haven't?
Yeah, I've always loved to read, and I've always been very focused. Certainly I was when I ran athletics at track and field, but I read, and there were writers who inspired me, and I also realized that there had not been a lot or many voices about the people in the Appalachian region I grew up in, and their lives. I wanted to honor their lives by writing about them, but also not to sentimentalize them or demonize them, but to show that they were human beings. And my hope is when readers in Europe or China or anywhere else, they recognize that there are different customs, folkways, among my characters, but ultimately their concerns are of all human concerns, that people share these ultimate concerns of love and hate and fear. And I think that's a good message to be reminded of, particularly these days when the world seems so fractured.
You once told me that you were inspired by a writer, I think, who said that history is a nightmare from which we cannot awaken. In what way would you say that we are living in the middle of a nightmare now with the coronavirus? And what does he say awakened, whether it's in countries or in individuals?
Well, the quote came from James Joyce's Ulysses, and I agree with it, because it seems in the world that whenever we seem to be making progress and we seem to be almost, as I think a Japanese writer a few years ago said, that we were at the end of history, but we're not, unfortunately. And right now, in part because of COVID, but there are other problems as well. We live in a world that's very, that seems to have learned nothing from the past, and that we seem almost doomed to repeat the nightmare of history.
And this particular nightmare, what did it awaken? How did it transform people and countries? What did it show from us, whether it's in the best ways or the worst ways?
Well, I think in the worst ways, it has inspired a high degree of tribalism, a sense of separateness of cultures, which is very unfortunate. Within the United States, unfortunately, it's been a very fraught time, largely because of Trump had a lot to do with that. But right now, our country is still very divisive. And in my new book, I actually wrote one of the most important parts of the book that just came out in the United States last fall is a story about the Civil War in America and how right now, I'm not saying we're going to have a civil war, but that same kind of tension and conflict is very, I think, very disturbing and at times very frightening in my country.
Now, during those times, a lot of writers were totally paralyzed, which wasn't your case, as you were just saying. You wrote a new book and you published it in the US. It's called In the Valley, which we'll have to wait a little before it appears into French. But how would you say that those 10 tales reflect those dark times we are living right now?
Oh, very much so. And actually, Gallimard will be bringing it out in the book out in France next year. So it will be coming to Europe. But the stories are all about people in really extremely stressful situations. And that I feel reflects what's happening with COVID, but also with, particularly in the United States, what's happening in the last few years as far as a society fracturing. But that, to me, in many ways, though, I think the stories, the characters in some of the stories reveal the best, that there are people who kind of rise to the occasion. They have in the past, and maybe they will in the present and future. The novella, which is the largest part of the book, though, is a short novella, as we call it. And that is about environmental concerns because I grow increasingly worried about what we're doing to the environment worldwide, also in the United States. So I think, once now that Donald Trump's out, that there will be more emphasis on environmental questions.
As you were saying, you grew up in those Appalachians that are often at the heart of all of your stories, of all of your books. Did this particular environment, this beautiful nature, gave you this sense of ecology that concerns you so much today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like having, my grandparents, one set of my grandparents, they were farmers. And I saw the way that they had to take care of the land, that the idea of that you can be productive, but you have to also keep from harming it. And, but also, the area I grew up in and where I still live is very, very rural. And I think that connection to the natural world is hugely important for us. I think particularly now, because with technology, it's too easy to believe that reality is inside as we're doing right now, inside the computer screen, but we are connected to the natural world. And whether we believe that or not, we are. And if we destroy it, we're going with it.
Now, it's something that we feel that the new generation is very concerned with. There are a lot of movements, whether it's in Europe or other parts of the world, where youngsters, even teenagers, took into movements for ecology. What do you feel towards that?
Well, I'm heartened. I feel like in many ways my generation has not done well in that regard. And so I'm glad that younger people, and this is true in the United States too, that there's that sense that this is the only planet we have. And also, unfortunately for them, they're going to be the ones who have to pay the highest price if we do continue to destroy the planet.
Now, going back to your book, your last book with these short stories, would you say that they are an allegory of your country and its violence, violence that is present also throughout all of your writing, whether it's a violence that touches the American society or the American people and individuals, and how can literature give an allegory of that?
Well, I think literature doesn't, literature doesn't necessarily answer the questions, but it raises them and depicts them. And I see my role as more as witness, but one aspect that's very important to me, because I do write about violence, is to show the repercussions to the people beyond just the person immediately in the violent act. I think that way I don't glamorize the violence. But in the Valley, in the novella, though, I actually use the allegory of Noah's Ark, because I make the valley that's being destroyed by lumbermen who are cutting down every tree. The animals move out gradually, each in pairs in the story, two at a time. The deer and the bear, and then the smaller animals, and it's the opposite of Noah's Ark. Instead of being saved in the world that I depict, they're having to leave because it's being destroyed. So there is an allegorical element there as well.
Mm-hmm. You were saying you were a witness. What do you feel a witness of?
Of human nature, of questions that in some ways are very complex, cultural, political questions. But some writers would disagree with me on this, but and that's fine. But I view my job as a writer is not to tell my reader how to think. What I want to do is to show this, as I say, witness this as truly and complexly, with the most complexity I can, and let the reader make, his or her own assumptions about that. I mean, obviously, I have certain particular, political biases. I mean, when I write about ecology, and particularly what I just told you about that valley, I am making in many ways a political statement, but I try not to just tell my reader, you've got to see it this way. And even in that story, I show that, workers who make their living cutting trees, what do you do when those jobs are not there for these people?
There is also a big complexity in politics. You were just talking about it. Now, Joe Biden has been president for more than 100 days now. And we have also seen that George Floyd, a murderer, was condemned. Do you believe that these are symbols of hope and justice?
Well, I think they certainly of justice. I mean, and I think with some hope. Yeah, I do. I think that certain social issues that have been ignored too long are now at the front. But I think that the main hope I have is that with the change of administration and coming out of COVID, that my country can really, and unfortunately, I think what's happening in the United States is that the totalitarian elements of the left and the right have really risen, the worst aspects of both. And that has made, for people who are in the middle, the moderates, what I would call traditional liberals, it's a very complex situation. And I'm hoping we can start to work our way out of it.
Do you also hope that the new generation, the youngsters that we're talking to, those students, are going to make maybe the world better, maybe a freer world?
I think so. I've seen changes on my college campus. One thing that has been amazing to me is, 30 years ago in the United States, people who were gay, transgender, those people would be ostracized. But now on my campus, I can see couples of the same sex holding hands. And I think that shows that there can be progress made. And I think that's where one of the aspects I find really heartening about the young people in the United States is that those old prejudices, they don't have those. And, that pleases me immensely, that they are more tolerant of those situations of race, of culture, different cultures. So that to me is a good sign.
Well, let's hope it's going to continue. Thank you so much, Ron Rash, and please take care.
Well, thank you. It's always good to see you, Corinne.
Me too.